Easy in the Harness: Stories, Solutions, and Strategies for Safe, Satisfying Driving. This podcast is all about working animals in harness, from agriculture to pleasure driving to performance driving at the international level. Learn about what driving is, training tips, history, and more with each episode. I am your host, Corey E.R. Trout of CERT Horsemanship. In this episode, I'm calling Ask and Allow: The Wisdom of A.L. de Indridi. And one of the big guiding principles that I have when it comes to training is ask and allow. And I think I kind of knew this a little subconsciously beforehand, but one of the books that I've read was called Give Your Horse a Chance. And this was a used bookstore find. I went there and I'm like, oh, look, it's a thick book about horses. I'll buy that. And it took a couple of years, but I finally read the book. And it was very good to have, sitting down, have a child sleeping on me book to read when my boys were little tiny. But it's this massive 500 plus page volume. And the writer's name is Lieutenant Colonel A.L. de Indridi. And he was a Hungarian officer, a prisoner of war during World War II. And he spent his time, part of his time at least, as a prisoner of war writing this book. It was first published in 1959. My copy was printed in 1999, and you can still find it as an ebook, but it appears to be tragically out of print in physical form. It was basically written as a cavalry manual, kind of a 3-day eventing guide, because 3-day eventing was developed to help the modern cavalry maintain fitness and so forth. And it's divvied up into dressage, show jumping, and cross country. And in both the jumping and cross country sections, de Indridi talked about different ways to approach the jumps using exact, super scientific mathematical equations. You take off at this spot, your horse will jump this far, you'll land at this spot, you'll have this many feet to do this many strides to the next jump. And Jim Wofford actually told a story, and he's one of our most influential 3-day event trainers in modern times. He passed away in 2003, but he went to the Olympics twice for the USA, and his mentor, Bert Nemeth, was mentored by de Indridi, and de Nemeth would relay how he went through all these combinations so that de Indridi would set them up and refine the exact measurements that went into his book. And in turn, de Nemeth used the exercises to train Jim Wofford and his contemporaries. But that's a complete sidetrack of what we're talking about here. It's just, it kind of connects what was written there to modern times. But anyways, so de Indridi was geared towards writing. But one of the things he said, and what stuck with me the most out of this book, was this: when we ask the horse to do something, we then have to allow them to do it. We give the signals, we manipulate the horse a little bit and say, I need you to be in this position, this shape, and then what we need to do is allow them to take up that shape, take up that direction, and do the thing we ask them to do. I mentioned this a little bit before in another podcast, but what you typically see, especially with newer drivers, is that they'll pick up the rein, hold it until they get what they want, and then release the signal. What I try to do and get my students to do is you pick up the signal and then you give it back. Pick up the signal and give it back. You give the animal that half second of space to actually respond to the aid, and be sure that you're not interrupting them making the attempt to do it. Are there times when I pick up a steady pressure? Yes, but it's super rare, and for the most part, it's ask, allow, ask, allow. Now, there's multiple reasons for this. I give the horse space to be able to respond. It gives them the time to respond. It prevents you as the driver from getting in the animal's way. If you hold on too long, the pressure that was there as a good signaling pressure then interrupts the animal's ability to follow through with it. So maintaining that steady pressure can cause the animal to disrupt its own flow of movement, basically. Now, the other thing that can happen, and you see this more with animals that have a tendency to brace up and push through things, you pick up that steady pressure, and if you stay too long, they then push into and lean on it. You pick up that rein, and if you stay there too long, they'll say, hey, you can hold up my head for me. Great, it was getting heavy. And then you end up with a higher set amount of pressure, and over time it just wears you out. The other thing that happens is if you have a heavy contact, you then have to get louder or heavier in order to get a response. It's a lot harder to feel a 5-ounce change in pressure when you already have 5 pounds in your hand. So be sure you want that light. If you have contact, if you have pressure in your hands, you want it to be super light so that they can feel when you make an alteration. But the other thing with ask and allow, when the signal and give is that it's much harder to ignore pulsing pressure. There's a reason that trucks and tractors and things, when they back up, they have a beep, beep, beep instead of a steady beep noise, because that come and go sound re-stimulates your ears. Oh, there's a thing. Oh, there's a thing. Oh, there's a thing. Beep, beep, beep. A steady sound is a lot easier to tune out. Same goes for pressure. I'm pretty sure we all wear clothes and realize that you get used to the pressure of the clothes on your skin and you tend to ignore it unless there's something ill-fitting or painful going on. Same thing with your animal's harness. Okay, this is the breeching, saddle, hip strap. You don't have to react to that because they're there all the time. Same thing goes for steady pressure. If you have steady pressure, the horse is going to become dull to it and get used to it. So what the ask and allow does also is that it allows you the time to check and see if the horse is actually responding. So you pick up that pressure, let it go, give them the space to react before you ask again or ask for more if needed. So this is another thing that I've picked up on over the years is if you're rewarding the try, you pick up your light pressure, you give the horse an opportunity to respond, and if they make an effort towards the thing but haven't fully committed to it yet, you can ask soft again. There's a typical way we ask for something. You ask softly first and gradually increase the pressure until you get what you want. That's the training for dummies version of it. But if you ask for something lightly and you get a response, you don't necessarily want to increase your pressure. Some animals aren't going to be offended if you ask softly. They start going, you ask harder because you didn't get it, and they say, oh, I guess I messed up. And they try a little harder for you. But there are animals that have a little higher opinion of their self-worth. And they will get offended if you start yelling at them when they're already trying or they're in process of doing the thing. So if you feel like an effort is being made, yes, you can ask again to ensure that you get the full response, but ask at the same level of what you initially did. This is really important with an animal that gets offended when you yell at them as they're trying to do the thing, and it is also important for animals that are honestly trying but have no idea what you're asking them to do. In a training situation, you may be asking for a completely new thing and say, we're asking to yield the haunches, and you've never yielded the haunches on the horse before, and you start tapping the air, they don't do anything. You start tapping their side and they start moving, but not the right way. They're going forwards, backwards, they're doing this, that, and the other thing. If they're making an effort, increasing the pressure isn't going to make them magically make the effort better. You just have to wait at the same level until they give you the right answer and then you release. So think of it this way. If you're working on a math problem and the teacher starts yelling at you about it as you try to do it, it's not going to help you with your calculations. Why would we do the same thing to our animals? If they're making an effort, why would we yell at them, especially if it's a new skill they're unfamiliar with? So, in conclusion, giving your horse the time and space to respond to what you ask is essential for their development. It helps them know and understand what you want. It helps them to find quiet space to move into. And that's another thing that I try really hard to do is I want to leave my animal alone as much as possible. I want to set it up so that they are willingly and enthusiastically doing the things that I ask because it helps them move better, because it gives them more freedom, because it ultimately is something that they want to do. So this asking and then allowing gives them greater freedom, better understanding, and it's also easier on the person too. So Give Your Horse a Chance by Lieutenant Colonel A.L. D'Indradi. It's not a book for the faint of heart because some of it's really quite technical, but it has some excellent advice in it. And especially that first section on the basic dressage work. It is very thorough and covers things. If you're not interested in jumping at all, you just read the first third of the book. I hope you enjoyed this and learned something new. If you have questions or comments, you can reach me at easyintheharness@gmail.com. If you wish to support this podcast and other educational content, please go to our Patreon at patreon.com/certhorsemanship. That's CERT horsemanship. It will also be linked in the show notes. Being a supporting member gives you early access to the podcast episodes and transcripts. Higher levels of support give you access to videos, diagrams, and more that I have to offer, covering subjects from harness fit and function, vehicle selection, maintenance, and training your horse to drive, as well as more. This episode was produced by Amaris Saldate. And remember, you have freedom when you are easy in your harness.